Hey guys, it's Kim. I'm back, and today we are talking about The Struggle, which is Titan series number 3. This beautiful book right here. Our main characters are Seth and Josie. It is dual POV. It is by Jennifer Armentrout, and you know I love me some Jennifer Armentrout, and I love the series, and I love Seth. So 5 star. It's 5 star. It is a paranormal romance. It takes place in the same world as The Covenant. It is a spin-off series from the Covenant series, which I also love. And yeah, so you get a lot of, we see Josie grow and change. We see Seth grow and change. We see the world get bigger. We get to see more of Alex and Aiden and the Scooby Gang, which is like Deacon and Luke. Oh, and we get some cameos by some of our other favorites. And let's see. We get, things continue in the war against the Titans. And Josie takes the brunt of all of everything. And I feel so sorry for Josie. But the thing is that, characters don't grow from nothing. There's usually you usually have to walk through something. There's some kind of pain that causes that character growth. So, in order for Josie to grow and become, the fierce woman that she is, she kind of has to walk through some things. Poor Seth also has to walk through some things, and he literally gets his world rocked like twice. And Seth definitely changes in this book. Yeah, and it leaves off with a, wanting to read the next one, what's going to happen next kind of thing. So, yeah, so I love this book. I think you should read. I think you should read all of Jennifer Armentrout's books, honestly. I mean, that's why I've got the shirt with the JLA boys, and there's Seth right there. So, yeah. That is the spoiler-free portion of this video. And now we are on to the recap, aka the spoilers. Alrighty then. So, this picks up where the other one left off, right? And I told you it's dual POV, so it switches between Seth and Josie. So Seth is driving away from Josie. He's like trying to do the right thing. He's like, I'm afraid that I'm going to drain her, so I'm just going to leave, right? He's trying to do the right thing. And poor Seth, whenever he tries to do the right thing, I swear he just gets kicked in the teeth. So the nymph Ewan shows up. I guess it's E-W-A-N. I guess that's how he says Ewan. Anyway. And he tells Seth, he's like, why are you driving? And Seth's like, you know another way to get there? And he's like, I'll just picture where you want to go. So Seth does. He pictures Andros Island in Greece, and poof, he's there. And there's like all these people there that are waiting for him. Yeah, it's pretty freaky. So the nymph says the same thing to Seth that Grandma Papyri, whatever, said to Alex, and calls Seth the god of life and death. So then back in Cali, there's an earthquake, and a hole opens up in the floor, and poor Alex and Aiden and Seth and Josie, it's like there's freaking zombies coming out of the hole in the floor, and they're all fighting them. Then Hades and 2 of his men show up, and they deal with the zombies, and then Apollo shows up, and he's like mad. He's like, I told you not to kill the Titans. And they're like, no, you didn't. He's like, well, I told you to entomb them. They're like, but you didn't tell us not to kill them. I'm like, we didn't know something was going to happen. Like, it's just it's just this funny little nod to the gods, right? And the Greek gods, that they don't tell you everything you need to know. They give you half the information and then be mad that you didn't do what they wanted you to do with half the information. So, he's like mad, and he's like, now we're going to have to go deal with Seth. And Josie, y'all, I couldn't believe it. Like, I was so proud of my girl. I was like, yes, Josie. Josie goes off. She goes off. She's like, you're nothing but an absentee father. She's like, I want to see my mother. I want to talk to my mother right now because, supposedly her mother was somewhere safe. And then he tells her that by the time he got to the farmhouse to go get her mother was already dead. So, yeah. So, that's just like another blow. Like, Seth has left her. There was freaking zombies coming out of the floor. Her dad is like trying to kill Seth. And now she finds out her mom is dead. Yeah. Josie is not having a good time. So she kind of freaks out, and she's outside, and Alex comes outside to talk to her, and they kind of have this really cute, like, girl moment. Like, I love that they're friends. Like, it makes me happy. So Seth is like thinking about Josie, and the next thing you know, he poofs into her room where she's sleeping, and he's like watching her sleep. Then he starts getting the craving for the ether, so he pops back to Andros Island. And it switches back to Josie. Josie and Alex are outside in the morning, and Hyperion shows up. Like seriously, this chick cannot get a break. So everybody is fighting Hyperion. Aiden and Luke Alex and Josie are fighting them. Then Aiden comes out because, of course, Alex is fighting. Then Aiden's there. Then Luke and Deacon show up. And Josie, like, she realizes that Hyperion will kill every single one of them to get to her. So she puts herself between Hyperion and the others. Then the Furies show up, and Hyperion takes Josie. So she wakes up, and she don't know if it's a basement or what. It's just a dirt floor, okay? So she wakes up. There's two other people there, the missing demigods that they've been trying to find. The guy is Mitchell. The girl is Lauren. So they have these weird bracelets on their arms that like nullify their powers. And Josie's got them on her arms too. So she can't even fight. Not with the elements because of the bracelets. So Hyperion shows up and tells Josie that for the gods and the Titans to live outside of Olympus, that they have to feed. Because, you know, in Olympus, they have like, the air is ether, right? So when they leave Olympus and they're on planet Earth, what would you call it? Because Olympus, like, isn't on another planet. But anyway, if they're not in Olympus, they have to feed. And so, it switches back to Seth. Poor Seth is all up in his feelings about leaving Josie, and he is drinking. And Basil, the servant, all these people are there voluntarily. Nobody's like forcing them to be there. And like Seth even tries to get them to leave, and they won't. So Karina, one of the priestesses, yeah, y'all, there's a temple and priests and priestesses. One of the priestesses comes in and tells Seth that he is a god. And that if he's outside of Olympus, he has to feed. And Seth's already in his feelings. He's drunk and he's feeling some kind of way. So he feeds off Karina. We switch back to Josie, and she is in the cell, and the girl, Lauren, is dead. And they just left her there. Like, she died, and they just left her there, like, in the cell with Josie and Mitchell. Yeah. Friggin' Titans, man. So the guy starts freaking out. So we switch back to Seth. Karina tells Seth that he is the god of life and death, and that the only beings that can destroy him, because now that he's a god, he's an absolute being. And the only beings that can destroy him are Zeus, Hera, and Kronos, but he can destroy them too. So we switch back to Josie, and Hyperion is like feeding off of her every day. Okay? And he takes her outside every day because he says something about, because Apollo is the sun god and her being Apollo's daughter, that being out in the sun helps recharge her ether or whatever so he can feed off of her again. So one day, I think she's like 9 days in, one day she makes a run for it, and he grabs her. And Tethys, T-E-T-H-Y-S, Tethys, this female Titan shows up, and then them two start making out, and it gets a little weird. Not Tethys and Josie, but Tethys and Hyperion. Anyway, Kronos wants to see Josie. So now Hyperion's already been feeding off Josie every day. Okay? Now they taking her to Kronos for Kronos to feed off of her. And like when they take her to the building where he's being kept at, there's apparently like piles of bodies out in the yard, where apparently they were trying to feed him halves and pures, whatever, and it just wasn't working. And so she gets in there, and he's this wrinkled little old, feeble little man who can't even sit up. Like one of the other Titans has to sit him up so he can feed off of her. And he feeds off of her, and it is very painful. So we switch to Seth, and he is searching for Hyperion and Josie, because he was trying to find Josie and couldn't. Like, he was trying to poof back to her like he did when she was in her room, and he couldn't find her. And so he went somewhere. I think he went to the Covenant. or he goes to Gable's house. He goes to Gable's house. That's what it is. He goes to Gable's house, sees the mess, realizes something must have happened, right? And he goes to the Covenant, and when he gets there, Deacon goes off on him. He's like, you left her. Hyperion's had her for 9 days. So he was trying to feel Josie. So he goes back. So Deacon tells him, Alex and Aiden went to the islands to get you because that Josie was going to the islands to get you because she wanted to be with you. So he goes back to Andros Island to meet up with Alex and Aiden. So we switch back to Josie. She's back in wherever she's being held, and she is bad off. Like, she can't even, like, hold herself up off the floor. Like, she's bad off, okay? Perseus comes in to get her, and he held her down while Kratos was feeding on her, okay? So we switch back to Seth. Alex and Aiden show up at the house, and Alex talks to him and then Aiden, and they kind of like have this moment, and it's really sweet because they like basically make up and help Seth kind of stop his self-hatred. Then he keeps trying to feel Josie, and finally he feels her, so he goes to leave, and Aiden's like, no, take me with you in case there's a problem. So he does. So they find Josie lying on the ground, beat all to you know what. Like, she is beat. Like, Seth says there's not a place on her body that's not covered in blood, dirt, or bruises. So Seth kills Perseus, like just godbolt dead. And he gets Josie back to the house in Greece. So we switch back to Josie. She wakes up and goes looking for Seth and finds him with Karina. Yeah, feeding on Karina. Yeah. So they either have to feed, like, by having their mouths very close, but Seth refuses to do that because he's like, no, you know, and the reason he feeds off Karina is because the other priestesses are blonde and it reminds him of Josie. So Karina's a brunette, so Karina's the only one he feeds off of. So you either have to get your mouths really close, or you can take your hand and put it on somebody's chest and pull the ether that way. So that's what he's doing when Josie walks up and finds him. Yeah. So needless to say, I mean, luckily, like, she's kind of out of it. So I don't think she really at the moment realizes what's going on. So Alex sees him too. And Alex like cusses him out. It's like, you're such a dumbass. So Josie wants to shower. She can't even walk. So Seth carries her to the shower. And then, like, while she's in the shower, she starts to have a breakdown, which who can blame her? Like, she was freaking kidnapped by Titans and fed off of until she nearly turned into a dried out husk like poor Lauren. I mean, like, girlfriend's having a day. You know what I'm saying? So she's like balled up in the shower crying, and Seth comes and picks her up and like gets her cleaned up and dried off and takes her to bed. And when she wakes up, she goes off on Seth. And I was like, yes, honey, yes. Because even though that's your man, he messed up. He messed up, y'all. So he apologizes. Yes, he apologizes. And he feeds her, like hand feeds her and tells her how much he loves her. And so they have this like really sweet, it's really sweet moment. So he takes her on a tour of the house and tells her about his mom and dad. Like, apparently his dad was a gardener on the premises. And like, he used to follow the guy around and used to watch him outside working. And then one day Seth was like having a bad day or something, and the guy came and sat down and talked to Seth. And then the next day, Seth got shipped off to London to the Covenant. So he tells her that his dad died protecting his mom, and they kind of like have this moment where they, you know, profess their love to each other. And then they go in the kitchen because Alex and Aiden are supposed to be making breakfast, but Alex and Aiden are in the kitchen making out. And Seth's like, you know, I eat here. And so Seth ends up making breakfast for everybody. And Josie is telling Alex and Aiden, I'm just going to call him AA or double A. Let's call him double A. Yes. Okay. Josie tells double A about Mitchell, the other demigod. And she's like, you know, we need to go find him. We need to get him. And Seth is like, no, girl, like, you got no powers. Like, you got the bracelets on, you got no powers, because I can't figure out how to get the bracelets on. So Aiden decides to check out. He's like, let me, you know, let me get in touch with some of my people that are in the pure communities and find out if, you know, we can get a lead, because she said she saw a whole pile of pure bodies, so there's got to be pures missing from somewhere. So Seth goes to the temple to see what he can find out for Josie, and Karina tells him, because there's like a dagger and a flame, and Karina tells him, well, if you spill your blood over the flame, and call for Apollo, he'll probably answer. Because this whole entire time that Josie has been missing, Aiden has been calling for Apollo, Alex has been calling for Apollo, Josie's definitely been calling for Apollo, Seth's been calling for Apollo, he don't answer. So Seth does the flame thing, and it works, and Apollo shows up. And so Seth talks to Apollo. First of all, he kind of goes off, and he's like, you're like the worst father ever. And Apollo's like, don't talk to me about how much I love my daughter. And I'm like, you kind of let her get sucked on like a, Capri Sun. So Seth talks to Apollo about the bracelets, and Apollo's like, I gotta talk to Hades. So Seth and Josie are like trying to make up officially and have sexy times when Aiden interrupts, knocking on the door because Deacon and Luke have found another demigod. So they all go to the Covenant in South Dakota, and Seth and Aiden go to check out a Pure community in Texas because there's been some Pures missing from there, and they're like, well, let's go see what's happening. Or no, they reported shades. That's what it was. They said they were having shade activity. So Josie and the Scooby Gang are going to try to talk to the demigod who has locked herself in her room because basically Deacon and Luke kidnapped this girl, and, she's having a hard time dealing with that she's in this new world, much like, any of us would. So Seth and Aiden head to take out the shades, and they have to break into some office building, and Seth being Seth just like busting through the window. So we switch to Josie, and Josie is talking to Cora, who's the other demigod. She's talking to Cora with Deacon, and Cora kind of calms down and starting to process things. Like they're talking to her through the door. And then she tells, because apparently they think she's Demeter's daughter because she can make like dead plants come back to life and stuff. And she's like, yeah, and I can tell when somebody's pregnant. And so they're like talking and everything through the door. And then when they open the door, Cora is looking at Josie's stomach, talking about, I'm not crazy, I'm not crazy, I'm not crazy. And so Josie's like, uh-oh. Because Josie's been throwing up and she's been really tired, and she thought it was the bracelets, but what if she's preggers? So she goes to talk to Alex, and she's like, I think I need a pregnancy test. So Alex takes her to the infirmary, and guess what? She's pregnant. She's gonna have a baby. So we switch to Seth. Seth and Aiden are kind of fighting the shades. Really, Seth is sitting back and letting Aiden fight all the shades because he's Seth. So he corners one and asks them about the Titans and figures out that they're in Texas. So we switch back to Josie. Seth comes back, and she tells him that she's pregnant. And he's just like so flabbergasted. Seth, who they always say is just like the picture of grace, right, falls on his hind parts because he's just so flabbergasted. And she thinks like he's upset, and he's like, no, baby, I'm so happy. And so he's like overjoyed, and, they celebrate. I'm thirsty. I write in my notebook about time we ain't had none since they made that baby. I do. Oh, God. Well, I was thirsty. Then Josie has a nightmare about the warehouse and remembers seeing a name on a truck. And so she wakes up and she tells Seth, like, I think, this is where they're at. So Seth tells Aiden so they can go find the Titans, and Seth and Josie are outside because she told him about the whole thing with Hyperion taking her out in the sun. He's like, well, that makes sense. And he's kind of upset that Hyperion thought of it and he didn't to take her outside in the sun so she'd feel better. So they're outside in the sun eating lunch when the Scooby Gang shows up, and Deacon's like, oh yeah, I found, and Seth's like, because Josie's being pregnant, he don't want Josie going. So Deacon kind of takes the hint. He's like, oh yeah, The John Winchester from Supernatural is now on The Walking Dead. So, then all of a sudden, like, while they're all outside, these doors appear in the grass, and it's doors to not Hades, to the underworld. I mean, I guess technically it's to Hades, because he's in the underworld. Anyway, doors to the underworld open. And who comes walking out but Caleb? Yes. So there's this whole, like, really sweet reunion with Caleb and Alex and Aiden and Deacon and Luke, and it's really cute. And he grabs Josie's hands and says the exact same thing that he said to her in her dream, which is, it's about time, don't you think? Josie's been having these dreams, and she thought they were just dreams, but they were prophecies, because and she kind of freaks out because now she's realizing that her dreams are prophecies, and that's kind of, it seems like a good thing, but Josie's also been having dreams about her dying, and so, yeah. So she's like, well, if everything else I've dreamt has come true, does this also come true? So she's kind of freaking out a little bit, understandably. So Caleb takes the bands off of Josie. Apparently Apollo went down to the underworld and was arguing with Hades about taking the bands off. And Hades like, I ain't going nowhere near Seth. And so they figured that A, Seth couldn't kill Caleb again because he's already dead. And B, you know, they wanted Caleb to take the bands off of Josie and put them on Seth. But Caleb's like, I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. So just let me stay here as long as I can. And Seth's like, fine by me. So when they go to bed, Seth sneaks off while Josie is sleeping, and Aiden sees him, and he's like, Seth's like, you're not going with me, dude. And by the way, please keep an eye on Josie for me while I'm gone. So Seth gets there to the warehouse. He finds Mitchell's body. Poor Mitchell is dead, has been dead for a while, he says. Hyperion shows up. They start fighting. Seth kills Hyperion because he's Seth and you hurt his girl. So what did you think he was going to do? Then Tet shows up, sees what's happened, and she takes off running. Then Apollo shows up and goes off on Seth, and they fight each other. And it's kind of like because, I mean, you know, there's some tension there. So then we switch to Josie, and she's talking to Alex and Aiden when Seth shows back up and tells them what he's done. And then she's thinking about, you know, her dreams that she's been having, and that's where it leaves off. Yeah. So that is the end of the struggle. So we have to wait for the prophecy, which is the last book in the Titan series, to find out what happens. But yeah, so I love this book. I love this series. I love this author. I love this cover model. I love the characters. I love everything. So yeah, thanks you guys. I'll see you next time.